There is a particular kind of darkness that changes the way you think. I am standing a long way underground, and I have just switched off my lamp. I want you to understand what happens when you do that, because it is not what you expect. It is not like closing your eyes. It is not like a dark room at night. Your eyes stay open, and they keep working, and they search, and they find nothing at all. There is no shape to adjust to, no faint gray, nothing. After a few minutes, your mind grows uneasy and begins, quietly, to invent things for you to see, because it cannot accept that there is nothing there. And the silence does something similar. Down here there is no wind, no birds, no traffic, no weather. Only, every so often, the sound of a single drop of water falling into a pool somewhere in the black, and the enormous patient quiet around it. That is the first thing you have to understand about caves. We think of them as holes, gaps, an absence, a bit of missing rock. And they are the opposite of that. They are rooms that have been sealed and kept, in total darkness, at a steady temperature, with no sun and no weather, and almost nothing to disturb them. For spans of time our minds are not built to hold. Let me give you the scale of it, because it matters. There is an entire world under our feet, and we have barely walked into the hallway. The deepest cave we have ever descended goes more than 2 kilometers straight down into the earth, and it took teams of people days simply to reach the bottom. Beneath every limestone landscape on this planet, there are systems of passages, some of them hundreds of kilometers long, that no human being has ever entered, and in all likelihood, never will. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of the space directly beneath our own feet. And here is why that matters so much. On the surface, everything is being destroyed all the time. Rain, sun, frost, wind, plants, animals, us. Nothing on the surface is left alone. But a cave has no weather. A cave has no sunlight to bleach things and no seasons to crack them apart. A cave is a room where the clock has very nearly stopped. Whatever falls into it, or is painted on it, or crawls into it and dies, tends to simply stay, more or less as it was. For 10,000 years, for 50,000, for 5 million. What follows are 7 things the dark has been keeping. 7 discoveries out of the caves of the world, of the kind people like to call terrifying, and several of them have earned the word many times over. But I will make you the same promise I always make at the start. I will keep what is true, separate from what is merely frightening, and where a story has run out ahead of the evidence, I will stop, and I will say so. That matters more underground than almost anywhere, because the dark is where our imaginations are least restrained. We will count them down, from the 7th to the 1st, and as we go, we move deeper into the rock, and further back in time, until at the very end we reach the largest secret of all, a living world beneath us, vast beyond any reasonable expectation that we did not even suspect was there. Let us go in. Number 7. The cave with its own sky. In the jungles of central Vietnam, hidden behind a wall of forest so dense that people walked past its entrance for years, there is a cave so large that it has stopped behaving like a cave at all. It is called Hang Son Doong, and it holds the largest cave passage ever measured on this planet. That is a phrase that slides past you, so let me try to make it land. The main chamber is tall enough and wide enough that you could stand a 40-story building inside it and still have room above. An entire New York City block, buildings and all, would fit within it. A river runs along its floor, a real river, with rapids. And people who go in do not walk through it in an afternoon. They camp inside it, for days. But the scale is not the strangest part. The strangest part is what happens when a cave gets that big. In 2 places along its length, the ceiling has collapsed, opening enormous holes to the sky far overhead. And through those holes, sunlight comes pouring down in great solid columns into the dark. Where that light lands, on the floor of a cave, hundreds of meters beneath the mountain, a forest grows. Real trees, tall ones, reaching up toward the distant hole in the roof. Ferns and vines and undergrowth. There are monkeys and birds down there, and creatures that came in and never left. And because the space is so vast, and because the cave air is cool while the jungle air outside is hot and wet, the cave has developed its own weather. Clouds form inside it. Genuine clouds, drifting through the chamber below the ceiling. It rains, indoors, hundreds of meters underground. There is a permanent mist. There are days when the people inside cannot see the far wall for the fog. So it is not really a cave in the way you and I mean the word. It is a landscape that happens to have a roof. A place with its own jungle, its own river, its own clouds, and its own rain, sealed inside a mountain, that no one on Earth knew about until a local man stumbled into its entrance while sheltering from a storm, and then could not find it again for nearly 20 years. That was a cave big enough to hold a sky. The next one is small and low, and has held something far stranger than weather. Number 6. The Sealed World. In the southeast of Romania, not far from the Black Sea, workers were testing the ground for a power station when their drill broke through into empty space. What they had found was a cave, only a little way beneath the surface, and what was inside it should not have been there. It is called Movile Cave, and it is not much to look at. You descend a narrow shaft, then crawl through tight limestone passages, then you must dive through a flooded section to reach the chambers beyond. It is cramped and lightless, and utterly unremarkable to the eye. And yet biologists regard it as one of the most extraordinary places on Earth, because this cave had been sealed, cut off from the surface, completely, for around 5.5 million years. Sealed since before our own species existed, since before there was any such thing as a human being. And in all that time, it was not empty. Down there, in the dark, there is an entire living world. Dozens of species of creatures, spiders, scorpions, leeches, woodlice, centipedes, all making their lives in that black, wet, cramped space. And the great majority of them are found nowhere else on this planet. They are pale, and many of them are entirely blind, having lost their eyes over the millions of years, because eyes are useless where there has never been anything to see. Not one animal in that cave, in 5.5 million years of generations, has ever seen the sun. The truly astonishing part is what keeps them all alive. Every food chain you have ever learned about begins with sunlight. Plants take light and make food, and everything else eats the plants, or eats the things that ate the plants. Remove the sun, and the whole structure collapses. Yet here is a fully functioning ecosystem that has never had a photon of sunlight in its entire history. What it runs on instead is poison. The water in the cave is rich in hydrogen sulfide, the gas that smells of rotten eggs, and in methane. And there are bacteria down there that eat those chemicals and build their bodies out of them, forming pale floating mats on the surface of the water. Everything else in the cave eats those mats, or eats each other. The whole world down there is built, from the bottom up, on chemistry instead of sunlight. And the air itself would kill you. There is roughly half the oxygen you are used to, far more carbon dioxide than your body can tolerate, and the hydrogen sulfide on top of that. Scientists go in for a strictly limited time, and not often, precisely because it is dangerous, and because breathing on the ecosystem too much might damage the very thing they came to study. Sit with what that means. A door was opened in the ground, and behind it was a complete living world that had been running quietly, in absolute darkness, on poison, for longer than there have been people to find it. It is the closest thing we have on this planet to discovering life on another one. And it was 18 meters beneath a field. That was life the dark had kept. The next one is a death. Number 5. The Black Hole and the Girl Who Fell In. Beneath the jungle of the Yucatan, in Mexico, there is a labyrinth. Hundreds of kilometers of limestone passages, winding beneath the forest floor, and almost all of them are flooded, filled to the ceiling with water so astonishingly clear that divers moving through it appear to be flying. Deep inside that labyrinth, a long way from any entrance, the passage opens without warning into a colossal void. A near-circular pit, dropping away into a blackness that the divers' lights cannot reach across. They named it, quite reasonably, Hoyo Negro, the black hole. And when they finally got lights down onto its floor, some 60 meters beneath the water, they found that they were not the first arrivals. The bottom of that pit is a graveyard. Scattered across it are the bones of animals that have been extinct for thousands of years. Giant ground sloths, enormous elephant-like creatures, saber-toothed cats, and lying among them, remarkably intact, the skeleton of a young human girl. They named her Naia. She was a teenager, perhaps 15 or 16 years old, and she died somewhere between 12 and 13,000 years ago. She is one of the oldest and most complete human skeletons ever found anywhere in the Americas. How did she come to be at the bottom of a flooded pit 60 meters down? The answer is that when she was alive, it was not flooded at all. In her lifetime, at the end of the last ice age, so much of the world's water was locked up in ice sheets that the sea was far lower than it is today, and these caves were dry. They were open, dark, dry caverns. It is thought she went down into them looking for water, in a landscape where fresh water was hard to come by, walking with a torch through the dark, and in that dark she came to the edge of the pit and did not see it. She fell, and the fall killed her, and she lay there in the dry black chamber along with all the animals that had made the same mistake. Then, over the following thousands of years, the ice melted, the sea rose, the water table came up, and the whole cave system slowly, silently filled. She has been underwater ever since, and she has changed what we know. For a long time there was a puzzle about the earliest Americans, because their skulls looked noticeably different from those of later Native American peoples, and some argued this meant a separate, earlier population from somewhere else entirely. Naia settled the question. Her skull has those distinctive early features, but the DNA recovered from her tooth is clearly ancestral to modern Native Americans. Same people, the faces changed over the millennia, the lineage did not. I will add one honest and unhappy footnote, because it belongs here. In recent years, divers entered the site illegally and disturbed her remains. A girl who lay untouched in the dark for 13,000 years, protected by 60 meters of water and hundreds of meters of passage, was finally reached by people, and damaged within a few years of being found. The cave kept her perfectly. We could not manage a decade. That was a person the dark kept. The next one is something a person left behind, on purpose. Number 4. The oldest story ever told. On the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia, there is a limestone cave, and on the wall of that cave there is a picture. It is not much to look at first. Faded red pigment, patchy, worn by time. But when you look properly, you can make out 3 figures that look like people, and beside them a wild pig, and the figures are clearly doing something to that pig, or with it. One appears to be holding a rod towards it. One seems to be reaching toward its head. That is not a decoration. That is a scene. Those figures are interacting with each other and with the animal. Something is happening in that picture. There is, in other words, a story on that wall, and in 2024, using a new and more precise dating method on the mineral crust that had grown over the paint, researchers put an age to it. That painting is at least 51,200 years old. Let that settle for a moment. 51,000 years. That is more than twice as old as the famous painted caves of Europe that most of us picture when we think of cave art. It is many times older than every civilization you can name. Older than farming, older than the last ice age's coldest depths. It is the oldest known figurative art anywhere on Earth. And, more remarkably, the oldest known scene, the oldest evidence we possess that a human being wanted to tell someone else about something that happened. And that is why I find this the most moving thing in this entire list. Everything else the caves have kept, they kept by accident. Bones fell in. Creatures crawled in. This did not happen by accident. Someone walked into that dark with a light and a handful of pigment, and reached up, and deliberately left a story for whoever came next. They knew in some fashion that the dark would hold it. They were right. It held it for 51,000 years, and the only reason we can stand in front of it today is that the cave never let in the sun or the rain that would have wiped it away in a season. We do not know what the story means. We never will. We do not know if it was a hunt, or a myth, or a memory, or a joke. But we know a person stood there and had something to say, and said it on a wall in the dark. And it is still there. That was a message from people like us. The next one is a message from people like us. The next one is a message from people like us. The next one is a message from people who were not. Number 3. The species in a fingertip. High in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, where Russia, Mongolia, Kazakhstan and China come close together, there is a modest cave in a river valley. It has a wide, dry mouth and good light at the entrance, and for that reason it has been an attractive place to shelter for a very, very long time. In 2008, excavators working in that cave found a small piece of bone. It was the tip of a finger, from a child, and it was so unremarkable that it sat unstudied for a while. Eventually the fragment was sent for genetic analysis, largely as a routine matter, to determine whether the child had been a Neanderthal or an early modern human. It was neither. The DNA in that fingertip belonged to a kind of human being that science did not know existed. Not us, not Neanderthals. Third population, a separate branch of our family that had lived across Asia for hundreds of thousands of years and had left no name, no legend, and, as far as we knew, no trace. We call them Denisovans now, after that cave, because we have nothing else to call them by. An entire kind of human being, discovered in a fragment of finger the size of a lentil. And the cave was not finished, because this same cave, it turns out, was occupied at different times by Neanderthals, by Denisovans, and by our own species. It is the only place on Earth where we know for certain that all 3 lived, in the same shelter, over the long millennia. And then, in 2018, from another sliver of bone in that same cave, came the finding that I think about most. It was a fragment from a girl of about 13, who died roughly 90,000 years ago. Her genome was red. Her mother was a Neanderthal. Her father was a Denisovan. She was, quite literally, a first-generation child of two different kinds of human being. Not a distant echo of ancient interbreeding, but the direct daughter of one of each, found in the one cave where both had lived. We had suspected these groups met, because their DNA survives in ours. If you have ancestry from Europe or Asia, you very likely carry a small amount of Neanderthal DNA. If your ancestry traces to Papua New Guinea or parts of island Southeast Asia, you may carry a meaningful amount of Denisovan DNA. There is even a gene that helps people in Tibet live comfortably at extreme altitude that appears to have come to them from Denisovans, tens of thousands of years ago. Their world is gone. Pieces of them are still walking around inside us. But suspecting is one thing. Holding the bone of the actual child, the daughter of that meeting, is another. And that bone survived because it was lying in a dark cave in Siberia where nothing came to destroy it. That was true, and strange, and quiet. The next entry is the loud one, and it is the one that is not true at all. Number 2, the library that was never there. Deep in the Amazon rainforest of Ecuador, there is a genuinely spectacular cave. Its entrance is a vast vertical shaft, dropping straight into the jungle floor, so that going in means being lowered on a rope into a hole in the ground. Inside are enormous chambers and long passages, and the local Shua people have known and used it for generations, climbing down to harvest the young of the oil birds that nest in the dark. The cave is called Cueva de los Tallos, and it is famous, worldwide, for something that does not exist. In 1973, a book was published claiming that hidden deep inside this cave system was an immense metal library. Not books of paper, but thousands of heavy metal plates, engraved with the writing of a lost civilization, stacked in a chamber underground, along with gold and strange statues. The book attributed all of it, of course, to a lost people who had been helped by visitors from another world. The claim spread, as such claims do, and it spread very far indeed. It was so widely believed that in 1976, an enormous formal expedition went in to find it. This was not a few enthusiasts with torches. It was over 100 people. Scientists across many fields, British and Ecuadorian soldiers, a film crew funded by 2 governments, and, as honorary leader, Neil Armstrong. The first man to walk on the moon went down a rope into a cave in the Amazon to look for a metal library. They did not find it. There was no library, no metal plates, no chamber of gold. What they found was a real and impressive cave, and, genuinely interestingly, human burials that are around 3,500 years old, which tells us people were using that darkness a very long time ago. But of the library, nothing. And I have to be plain with you about where it came from. The whole account rested on a single man's testimony. He never gave a precise location. He asked for money from those who wanted to verify it. And members of a later expedition came away convinced he had never actually been in those caves at all. The consensus among archaeologists is straightforward. The metal library was invented. Now, I want to be careful here, because it is easy to sound smug about this, and I do not want to. The people who believed it were not fools. They believed it because it is an irresistible idea, and because underground is exactly the place where such a thing could plausibly hide. The dark is the perfect home for that kind of story. You cannot see the end of a cave. There is always another passage. And here is the thing that makes this entry worth telling. There really is a library underground. It is not made of metal plates. We have already stood in front of a page of it, on a wall in Sulawesi, 51,000 years old. We have already held one of its records, in a fingertip in Siberia that told us about an entire lost kind of human being. The caves of the world are absolutely full of information that exists nowhere else, kept by the dark because the dark does not destroy things. The library is real. It just does not say what people wanted it to say. And the largest thing the dark has been keeping is not a record of the past at all. It is alive, and it is happening now, and it is far bigger than any of us imagined. Number 1. The buried living world. Everything we have looked at so far has been in caves, rooms with entrances that a person can be lowered into. But the rock beneath us is not made of rooms. It is mostly solid, threaded with pores and cracks too small to crawl through, and until quite recently we assumed that this was simply where the living world ended. Soil at the top, a bit of life in it, and then rock, dead rock, all the way down. That assumption was wrong. Spectacularly, almost comically wrong. Over the last few decades, as we drilled deeper for oil and minerals and science, and as we began carefully studying what came up, we found something waiting in the rock. Life. Not on it, but in it. Microbes, living in the tiny spaces inside solid stone, kilometers beneath the surface of the ground and kilometers beneath the floor of the sea. And then researchers did the arithmetic on how much of it there is, and the answer changed the shape of the world. The living things down in the deep rock are estimated to hold something in the region of 15 to 23 billion tons of carbon. To put that in terms you can feel, that is somewhere between 240 and 380 times the combined carbon of every human being alive on this planet. Roughly 70% of all the bacteria and archaea on Earth, the great majority of the individual living organisms on this world, are not on the surface at all. They are underground. The space they occupy has been estimated at around 2 billion cubic kilometers, which is very roughly twice the volume of all the oceans put together. There is, in other words, a biosphere beneath the biosphere, a living world under the living world, larger in volume than every sea, and we walked about on top of it for our entire history without knowing. And the things that live there are barely recognizable as life in the way we usually mean it. They exist without sunlight, of course, but also very nearly without energy, scraping the faintest possible living from chemical reactions in the rock and from water that has been trapped for ages. With so little to work with, they do not really grow. Some of them, it is thought, may go for thousands of years between divisions. There are serious suggestions that certain deep organisms may not divide for millions of years. Not dead, not dormant exactly. Just alive. At a pace so slow that our idea of a lifetime does not usefully apply. Down there in the hot dark, something can be a single individual for longer than our species has existed. Do you see what has happened by the time we reach the bottom of this list? We started, one entry ago, with people insisting there was a hidden world beneath our feet, a secret chamber, a lost civilization, keeping its records in the dark where no one could reach. And they were right about one thing and wrong about everything else. There is a hidden world beneath our feet. It is real, and it is unimaginably vast, and it has been down there the entire time. It simply was never ours, and it is not a ruin, and it is not a record. It is alive. It is the majority of life on this planet, living in the solid rock, beneath everything we have ever built, in permanent darkness, at a speed we can barely call living, and we did not notice it until about 5 minutes ago. That, in the end, is what these 7 share. A cave with its own jungle and its own clouds. A sealed world running on poison that has never seen the sun. A girl at the bottom of a black pit, kept for 13,000 years. The oldest story any human being ever told, still on the wall. An entire kind of human, recovered from a fingertip. A library that was never there. And, beneath all of it, a living world larger than the oceans, in the rock under our feet. I keep coming back to the same thought. Standing down here in the dark, we treat the underground as an absence, a hole, a gap, the part of the world where things are missing, and it is the exact reverse. The dark is not where things go missing. The dark is where things are kept, precisely because nothing down here is allowed to weather, or fade, or be bleached away by the sun. The surface is the place that forgets. The dark remembers everything, and asks for nothing, and simply waits to be walked into. There is one last thought I will leave you with. Every one of these 7 was found by accident, or very nearly. A drill went through a wall. A man sheltered from a rainstorm. A diver's light happened to fall on a floor 60 meters down. A scrap of bone was sent for testing, almost as an afterthought. Not one of them was the result of someone knowing what to look for. Which means the only honest conclusion is the uncomfortable one. What is down there is not rare. What is rare is us happening to look. If you want to be there when the next thing is found, subscribe to the channel. For now, the cave is quiet, and the dark is complete, and somewhere below me, in the solid rock, something is alive that has not needed to divide since before there were people, and is in no hurry at all to be found. Thank you for coming down into the dark with me.